In the untamed hills of Montana, where winter winds whisper secrets across empty prairies, fate weaves an unlikely tale. June Avery, 8 months pregnant and running from shadows of her past, never expected to find salvation chained to a tree. But there he was, Cal Bennett, a wealthy rancher with blood on his shirt and mysteries in his eyes, bound and abandoned in the wilderness. Against every instinct, she frees him, offering shelter in her weathered farmhouse. Two broken souls, each carrying burdens too heavy to bear alone, find themselves drawn together in a dance of healing and hope. But in these hills, the past never stays buried for long. As June's due date approaches and Cal's family emerges with accusations, dark forces gather on the horizon. What neither of them knows is that their chance meeting will spark a chain of events that will shake the very foundations of both their worlds. Could a moment of mercy in the wilderness change not just two lives, but the destiny of an entire valley? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. June's fingers trace the worn edges of her leather journal. Each scratch and scuff a reminder of another town fled, another close call survived. She settled into the farmhouse's only comfortable chair, a threadbare recliner that smelled of mothballs and forgotten memories, and opened to the latest entry, Ironwood Valley, Montana. Remote enough, maybe here. Through the window, morning light painted the frost-covered fields in shades of amber and gold. At 8 months pregnant, every movement had become a careful negotiation with her changing body. The baby stirred, a gentle reminder of why she couldn't stop running, not yet. The house groaned around her, its wooden bones adjusting to the morning cold. She'd found it through a newspaper ad 3 days ago. Caretaker needed, remote property, immediate occupancy, no questions asked. The owner, an elderly woman in a nursing home states away, had accepted June's first month's rent in cash without hesitation. Opening the journal to its first page, where a pressed wildflower marked the day everything changed, June let herself remember. Daniel's last words still rang in her ears. "You think you can hide my child from me?" His face had been twisted with the same rage that had sent her to the emergency room twice before. That night, she'd waited until he passed out, packed a single bag, and disappeared into the darkness. The baby kicked again, stronger this time. "I know, little one," she whispered, resting her hand on her swollen belly. "We're safer here." But even as she said it, her eyes drifted to the loaded revolver on the kitchen counter, a parting gift from the last shelter's security guard. "Just in case," the woman had said, showing June how to handle it with steady, practiced hands. From her chair, June could see most of the 100-acre property. The neglected barn leaned against the morning sky like a tired sentinel. Beyond it, dense pine forest stretched towards snow-capped mountains. The nearest neighbor was 5 miles away, the closest town 15. Perfect for someone who needed to disappear. She picked up her pen, adding to today's entry. "The silence here is different. Not the hollow quiet of empty motel rooms or the watchful hush of shelters. This silence feels alive, like the land itself is keeping our secrets." Between the journal's pages lay carefully researched escape routes, lists of women's shelters, and phone numbers memorized, then burned. She'd learned to plan methodically, to trust no one completely, to keep moving. But now in this remote valley, where winter was already tightening its grip, she had to stop. The baby was coming, and she needed time to prepare, to find some semblance of stability. Her doctor's words from 6 months ago echoed in her mind. "The stress isn't good for either of you." Easy to say when you're not the one looking over your shoulder at every turn. June had chosen this child over everything, her teaching career, her friends, the life she'd built. She wouldn't let Daniel's rage poison another generation. A branch snapped in the distant forest, making her freeze. Probably just deer. She'd seen a whole herd yesterday. But her hand moved instinctively to her belly, an ancient gesture of protection. The baby settled as if sensing her tension. June closed the journal, tucking it into its hiding place behind the loose baseboard under her bed. The morning stretched ahead, empty of everything except possibility and fear. She had work to do. The farmhouse needed cleaning, supplies needed organizing, and somewhere in the barn she hoped to find the tools to fix the creaking front door. She pushed herself up from the chair, one hand supporting her back. "Just us now, little one," she murmured to her unborn child, "and that's all we need." But even as she said it, something tugged at her awareness, a feeling she couldn't name, like the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for something to change. Outside, snow began to fall, soft and steady, covering her tire tracks on the long driveway. Nature itself conspiring to hide her presence, at least for now. June squared her shoulders and headed toward the kitchen. She'd survived this long by staying alert, staying prepared. Whatever this valley held for her and her child, she would face it with the same quiet strength that had brought her this far. The journal lay hidden in its new place, carrying her story, her fears, her hopes, and maybe, just maybe, the beginning of something new. The gunshots shattered the morning stillness like glass breaking. June dropped the feed bucket she'd been carrying to the barn, her heart hammering against her ribs. 2 more shots echoed. Across the valley, closer this time, followed by the distant rumble of vehicles. Her first instinct was to run back to the house, grab her go-bag, and disappear. But something made her hesitate. The sounds weren't coming from the road. They came from deep within the forest, where no vehicles should be. The smart choice would be to ignore it. Yet she found herself moving toward the tree line. The baby, shifting restlessly inside her, as if sharing her unease. The morning fog clung to the ground like a secret, and the frozen grass crunched beneath her boots. That's when she saw him. He was secured to a massive pine with heavy chains. His head slumped forward. Blood had frozen in dark patches on his expensive shirt, and his breath came out in ragged white clouds. At his feet lay a man's gold watch, its face shattered, hands frozen at 3:47. June's instincts warred with each other. The man could be dangerous. Everything about this screamed danger. But she couldn't leave someone to freeze to death, not even to protect herself. She'd seen too much cruelty in the world lately to add to it now. "Hey," she called softly, staying back. "Can you hear me?" He lifted his head slowly, and June caught her breath. Despite the bruises and blood, his face held a quiet dignity. His eyes, clear and alert, studied her with equal parts desperation and resignation. "Ma'am," he managed, his voice rough but cultured. "You need to leave. Now. They might come back." June picked up the broken watch. The inscription on the back read, "To Calvin Bennett, 3rd. May you always find your way home. Love, Father." The weight of it felt significant in her hand, like holding a piece of someone's history. "Mr. Bennett," she said, noting how he flinched at the name, "I'm going to help you, but I need to know, are you dangerous?" A bitter laugh escaped him. "To whom?" "The people who did this are my own flesh and blood. Family business," he added, seeing her confusion, "though we seem to have different definitions of how to handle disagreements." More vehicles rumbled in the distance. Cal's eyes widened. "Please," he whispered, "either help me or go. But decide quickly." June studied him for a long moment. She knew about family betrayal, about trust broken by those who should have protected you. The baby kicked hard, as if voting on the decision. She found the chain's weak point where it met the padlock. "I have bolt cutters in the barn," she said. "Can you walk if I free you?" "Yes." His eyes held hers. "But you should know. Helping me could be dangerous. These people, they don't give up easily." June thought of her own pursuer, of Daniel's relentless determination. "I'm familiar with that type," she said, her hand moving instinctively to her belly. "Wait here." His laugh was genuine this time, if pained. "Not going anywhere, ma'am." When she returned with the bolt cutters, his eyes fixed on her pregnant form with new understanding. "You're risking a lot," he said quietly, as she worked on the chains. "Why?" The padlock finally gave way with a sharp crack. "Because," June said, helping him stand. Sometimes the right thing and the smart thing aren't the same thing. He swayed. On his feet, steadying himself against the tree, the broken watch lay forgotten in the frost until June picked it up again. "Here," she said, pressing it into his palm. "Looks important." Cal stared at the watch for a long moment, his fingers tracing the inscription. "It was," he said finally. "Once." He pocketed it carefully, despite its ruined state. "Like a lot of things in my life." The sound of engines grew louder. Cal straightened, wincing. "Last chance to walk away from this, ma'am." June thought of her journal, filled with running and hiding. Maybe it was time to stop running, to stand and face whatever came, not just for herself now, but for her child, and maybe, just maybe, for this stranger with wounded eyes and a broken watch that spoke of better times. "My name is June," she said, offering her arm for support, "and my farmhouse is this way. Think you can make it?" He nodded, and together they began the slow journey through the morning fog, leaving behind a set of empty chains and footprints that the falling snow would soon erase. The journey back to the farmhouse took 3 times longer than it should have. Cal's injuries made each step a deliberate act of will, and June's pregnancy meant they had to pause frequently. The sound of vehicles had faded, but the tension in Cal's body told her the danger hadn't passed. Inside the farmhouse's kitchen, June eased Cal into a chair while she dug through her first aid supplies. The morning light, through dusty windows, revealed the full extent of his injuries. Defensive wounds on his hands, bruised ribs evident in his labored breathing, a deep cut above his right eye. "You know what you're doing," he observed as she cleaned his wounds with practiced efficiency. "I was a school nurse." June didn't add that the job had also taught her to spot the difference between accidents and abuse. Cal's injuries told a story of someone who'd fought back against multiple attackers. While working, she noticed him studying the kitchen's peeling wallpaper and ancient appliances. "Not exactly the Ritz," she said, a hint of defensiveness creeping into her voice. "No," he agreed, then added softly, "It's better. It's safe." June paused in her ministrations, surprised by his sincerity. She went to the drawer where she'd stored the property paperwork and pulled out the old farm deed she'd found yesterday. "Not as safe as you might think. Previous owners in a nursing home. I'm just a glorified squatter with 2 months' paid rent." Cal took the deed with his uninjured hand, studying the faded document. "Margaret Wheeler," he read. "I know this name." His voice shifted, recognition dawning. "She used to serve on the county board with my grandfather. This was one of the original homestead properties. And now it's barely standing," June said, resuming her care of his wounds. "But it's all I've got." "Sometimes all you need is a foothold," Cal said, still examining the deed. "A place to make a stand." His voice carried the weight of experience, of someone who understood what it meant to start over. The baby chose that moment to kick vigorously. June pressed a hand to her side, and Cal watched the gesture with a mixture of concern and something else, recognition perhaps, of another life hanging in the balance. "How far along?" he asked. 8 months. June busied herself organizing the medical supplies. "Clocks ticking. The father is why I'm here." She met his eyes steadily. "We all have our chains, Mr. Bennett. Some are just more visible than others." He nodded, understanding the boundaries she was setting. "Cal," he said, "please. Mr. Bennett is, well, that's part of what got me tied to that tree." "Family business," she echoed his earlier words. "The Bennett family owns half this valley," he explained, gesturing to the deed. "Or thinks they do. There's been a dispute over the original property line since my grandfather's time. My brother thinks he's found a way to claim the contested areas, including properties like this one." June's hand went protectively to her belly again. "So I'm squatting on disputed territory? You're living on land that my family's been trying to steal for 3 generations. Cal's voice held a mixture of shame and determination. "I refuse to sign off on the legal maneuvers, hence the family discussion in the woods." A loud vehicle, rumbled past on the distant road. They both tensed, but it passed without slowing. "They'll come looking," June said. It wasn't a question. "Yes." Cal met her gaze directly. "I should leave. You've got enough troubles without—" "No." The firmness in June's voice surprised them both. "Running doesn't solve anything. I should—" "No." She picked up the deed, studying the property lines drawn in faded ink. "Maybe it's time to stop running. For both of us." Cal watched her for a long moment, seeing not just a pregnant woman in hiding, but someone with the same steel in her spine that had once made Margaret Wheeler a force to be reckoned with in county politics. "Okay," he said finally. "But we do. This smart. And June," he waited until she looked at him. "Thank you. Not everyone would have stopped this morning." "Not everyone knows what it's like to need help," she replied, "and to have someone brave enough to give it." Outside, the snow continued to fall, erasing their tracks, while inside, two people who had lost faith in family began to find faith in each other. As evening settled over the farmhouse, June found Cal in the living room, attempting to clean his ruined suit jacket. Something fell from the pocket. A business card, its crisp white surface marred by dried blood. She picked it up before he could reach for it. "Bennett Holdings, LLC," she read. "Calvin Bennett III, Executive Vice President of Land Management." The card was expensive, the kind of thick stock that spoke of old money and boardrooms, a far cry from the man sitting before her in borrowed clothes from the farmhouse's previous owner. "Not my finest professional moment," Cal said, gesturing to the bloodstains, "though I suppose getting beaten by your own brother does tend to impact one's corporate image." June settled into her chair, one hand absently rubbing her lower back. The baby had been restless all afternoon, perhaps picking up on the tension in the air. "Tell me," she said simply. Cal studied the business card in her hands as if reading a story in the rust-colored stains. "My grandfather built Bennett Holdings from nothing, cattle ranching mostly. But he was smart, invested in land when it was cheap. By the time my father took over, we owned 30,000 acres. He winced as he shifted position, his ribs still tender. Dad expanded everything. More land, more cattle, more investments. But he was fair about it. Legitimate. When he died last month, my brother James took control and decided to be less legitimate," June supplied. "James found old surveys, property documents that had been modified. With them he could claim another 15,000 acres, small holdings, family farms, places where people couldn't afford to fight back." June thought of the deed in the kitchen drawer, of Margaret Wheeler, who'd served on the county board and now couldn't even remember her own name. "So you stood up to him." "I tried to stop it legally first. Threatened to go to the authorities." Cal laughed without humor. "James decided a family intervention was needed. Him and two of our cousins took me up to the woods for a discussion about family loyalty." The business card in June's hands suddenly felt heavier, weighted with violence and betrayal. She thought of her own family, parents who'd blamed her, were provoking Daniel, who'd urged her to try harder even after the second hospital visit. "Family loyalty," she said bitterly, "seems to only go one way sometimes." Cal caught something in her tone, a shared understanding of betrayal. "Your family? They didn't help? They chose their version of reality over mine. It was easier to believe I was exaggerating, that I was too sensitive." June's hand moved protectively to her belly, "until I couldn't hide this anymore. Then it became about working things out for the baby's sake." "And Daniel?" Cal asked carefully, convinced everyone he'd changed, that the baby made him want to be better. June's voice was steady, but her hands trembled slightly. "I almost believed it myself, until I found him researching ways to get sole custody once. The baby was born. He had it all planned, how he'd prove me an unfit mother, how no judge would believe." She stopped, surprised at how much she'd revealed. Cal reached over and gently took the blood-stained card from her hands. "Some people," he said quietly, "think ownership means they can destroy what they claim to love." Their eyes met in the fading light, recognition flowing between them. Here was someone else who understood how family could become a cage, how love could be twisted into control. "James will come looking," Cal said, tearing the business card in half. "Once he realizes the chains didn't hold. And Daniel will never stop searching," June finished. "I know." Cal leaned forward, his face grave. "I can leave, draw them away from here. You've got enough to deal with without—" "No." June's voice was firm. "Running splits us up, makes us easier targets." She gestured to the torn card. "They expect us to be alone, vulnerable, and we're not? Not anymore." June met his gaze steadily. "Unless you want to be." Cal studied her for a long moment, seeing the strength beneath her vulnerability, the steel core that had kept her moving forward. He thought of the morning, of her choice to help a stranger despite every reason not to. "No," he said finally. "I don't want to be alone. But this gets worse before it gets better. Are you sure?" "I'm sure," she said. "Sometimes standing your ground is the only way forward." Outside, the wind picked up, rattling the old windows. But inside, something else was building, a quiet strength born of shared understanding and the first fragile threads of trust. The next morning arrived with bitter cold and unexpected clarity. June found Cal at the kitchen table, his attention fixed on the local newspaper she'd picked up yesterday. His face had the tight look of someone reading their own obituary. "Bennett. Heir missing," the headline declared. "Local ranch empire in turmoil." Below was a photo of Cal from happier times, straight-backed in an expensive suit, wearing the confident smile of old money and assured destiny. "They work fast," he said without looking up. "James is controlling the narrative." His finger traced a quoted statement. "We're deeply concerned about Cal's recent erratic behavior. The stress of our father's passing has affected him profoundly." June set a cup of coffee before him, made from the last of Margaret Wheeler's stored supplies. "Setting up a mental health defense?" "More like laying groundwork for power of attorney." Cal's laugh was harsh. "Nothing says family love like having your—" Brother declared incompetent. She eased herself into the chair opposite him, her own coffee warming her hands. The morning sun caught the silver threads in Cal's dark hair, and June found herself noticing how his borrowed flannel shirt suited him better than the suit in the newspaper photo. "There's more," he said, turning the page. "Property notices. James is moving ahead with the land claims." He pushed the paper toward her, pointing to a column of legal notices. "He's filing liens against every disputed property, including this one." June scanned the dense legal text, her heart sinking. "Can he do that? Not legally. But he's counting on people not having the resources to fight back." Cal's hands clenched around his coffee cup. "The court dates are set for next month. Right around your due date, I'm guessing." Their eyes met across the table, understanding, passing between them. James hadn't known about June when he'd chosen the timing, but he couldn't have picked a more vulnerable moment if he'd tried. "I should be scared," June said, surprising herself with her calm. But after Daniel, she rested one hand on her belly, feeling the baby's morning stretches. Fear starts to feel like an old habit you can break. Cal watched the gentle motion of her hand, something softening in his expression. "You're the strongest person I've ever met," he said quietly. "You know that?" says the man who got beaten half to death and still wouldn't back down. But June felt warmth rise in her cheeks that had nothing to do with coffee, different kind of strength. Cal reached across the table, hesitated, then carefully laid his hand over hers, where it rested by the newspaper. His touch was warm, steadying. "You chose to help a stranger when you had every reason not to trust when trust had only ever hurt you." June looked at their joined hands, feeling the calluses on his palm that spoke of real work despite his corporate title. "Maybe," she said softly, "some things are worth the risk." The moment stretched between them, delicate as spider silk. Then the baby kicked against their hands, making them both jump, then laugh. Cal withdrew his hand slowly, as if reluctant to break the connection. "We need supplies," he said, all business again, but his eyes held a new warmth. "Food, primarily." And I need to make some discreet calls, see who's still loyal to Dad's way of doing things. June nodded, forcing herself to focus on practicalities. I can go into town. I'm not in any photos, and no one here knows me. It's not safe. Nowhere is safe. She cut him off gently. And a pregnant woman buying groceries draws less attention than a man matching the description in this. She tapped the newspaper photo. Cal studied her for a long moment, then reached into the pocket of his borrowed shirt and pulled out his wallet. Take this, please. There's a separate account from Dad. Emergency funds. James doesn't know about it. She accepted the wallet, understanding this was about more than money. It was trust, freely given, partnership in whatever was coming. Be careful, he said as she gathered her coat. And June? She turned back, caught by something in his voice. Come back. The words carried weight, not an order, but a request, a hope. She thought of her journal upstairs, filled with stories of running away. Maybe it was time to write about running toward something instead. I will, she promised. And for the first time in months, June stepped out into the morning light without looking over her shoulder, feeling the strange warmth of having someone to return to. June's trip to town had gone smoothly until she checked the post office box she'd set up under a false name. Among the junk mail lay a cream-colored envelope that made her blood run cold. She waited until she was back at the farmhouse, groceries stored, and Cal occupied with making phone calls from the barn's old landline. Before opening it, the letter. Inside was brief, written in Daniel's precise handwriting. Did you really think a restraining order could keep me from my child? I know you're in Montana, getting closer every day. When I find you, and I will find you, we're going to be a proper family, whether you like it or not. June's hands shook as she tried to crumple the letter, but Cal's quiet voice from the doorway stopped her. Don't destroy evidence. She hadn't heard him return. He stood in the kitchen entrance, his face grim. How long has he been sending these? This is the first since Idaho. June smoothed the letter on the table, her fingertips tracing the indentations of Daniel's angry pen strokes. He's usually more careful about leaving paper trails. This means he's getting desperate. Desperate people make mistakes, Cal offered, pulling out a chair beside her. They also get dangerous. June remembered the last time she'd seen that desperate look in Daniel's eyes. She'd ended up with 3 cracked ribs and a decision to disappear. Cal picked up the letter, studying it, with the eye of someone used to evaluating threats. The postmark's from Billings. He's working his way west. He hesitated, then added, my contacts in the sheriff's department, the ones still loyal to my father, they've been hearing rumors. A man asking questions in small towns, showing your picture, your brother's people. No, the description matches your ex. Cal's hand found hers under the table, a gesture becoming familiar. James is many things, but he's not aligned with Daniel. Small mercy. June squeezed his fingers, drawing strength from the contact. How did your calls go? Mixed news. Dad's. Old foreman Mike Reynolds, he's willing to testify about James's creative landscaping, moving property markers, altering fence lines. But most people are scared. James controls their mortgages, their grazing rights, and the ones who aren't scared. Dad had friends on the county board, people who remember what the Bennett name used to stand for. Cal's thumb traced circles on her palm, a soothing motion. They're willing to help, but we need proof, documents, witnesses. Like Margaret Wheeler. June thought of the nursing home resident who trusted her with the property. Advanced dementia. James probably counted on that. Cal's voice held old. Pain. He's been planning this for years, waiting for Dad to die. The attack on me wasn't spontaneous. It was cleaning up a loose end. June felt the baby shift restlessly, as if sensing the tension. She pressed her free hand to her side, and Cal's eyes followed the movement with growing concern. How long? He asked softly. 4 weeks, give or take. She tried to smile. Not exactly ideal timing. June. Cal's voice was heavy with something unspoken. If Daniel finds you, if James realizes you're helping me, you're vulnerable here, both of you." His fingers tightened on hers. "I have money cached away, enough to get you somewhere safe." "No." The force of her response surprised them both. "I'm done running. This baby deserves better than a life spent looking over our shoulder." She met his eyes steadily. "And so do you." Cal stared at their joined hands, at the crumpled letter between them. "I can't ask you to fight my battles." "You didn't ask. I chose." June's free hand covered his. "Just like you chose to fight for what's right, even when it cost you everything." Something shifted in Cal's expression. Wonder, perhaps, or recognition of a kindred spirit. "We'll need help," he said finally. "People we can trust, like Mike Reynolds and others. Dad's old lawyer, maybe. People who remember when the Bennett name meant something more than profit margins." His voice strengthened with purpose. "James thinks he's got it all figured out. The vulnerable pregnant woman, the unstable brother. He's not expecting us to fight back." June thought of Daniel's letter, of his certainty that he could control her future. "They never do," she said softly. "Men like that. They mistake kindness for weakness. Forget that the strongest steel is forged in fire." Cal's eyes held hers, and in them she saw the same quiet determination that had kept her going through months of running. "Then let's remind them," he said. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, promising more snow. But inside, surrounded by evidence of shared purpose and growing trust, two people who had lost everything found themselves planning not just survival, but revolution. The attic of the Wheeler farmhouse held decades of dust and secrets. Cal helped June navigate the rickety stairs, both of them armed with flashlights against the gathering dusk. They'd been searching for anything that might help their case when June's beam caught something rolled up behind a stack of boxes. "Look at this," she said, carefully pulling out what proved to be an old survey map, its edges frayed but the details still clear. Cal spread it across a sturdy trunk, his flashlight, revealing boundaries drawn in faded ink across familiar terrain. "This is it," he breathed, fingers tracing the property lines. "The original survey from 1952, before the changes." The map showed the valley divided into clear parcels, each marked with family names now mostly forgotten. Wheeler, Martinez, Dawson, Bennett. "Your grandfather's ranch," June said, pointing to the Bennett holdings. "It's smaller here, about a third of what we claim now." Cal's voice held a mixture of shame and revelation. "James didn't create this problem. He's just the latest to exploit it." June settled onto an old chair, one hand supporting her back. Even the attic's chill couldn't hide the flush of discovery on her face. "Tell me," she said. "All of it." Cal studied the map, as if reading a confession in its yellow pages. "My grandfather, Calvin Sr., he started with just 500 acres, good land but nothing extraordinary. Then the drought of '53 hit, banks foreclosed on half the valley, and he bought them out. Some, others." Cal's jaw tightened. The property lines started shifting. Just a fence here, a marker there. People were desperate, focusing on survival. By the time anyone noticed, the Bennett ranch had tripled in size. June's flashlight beam highlighted a notation in the map's corner. Margaret Wheeler's neat handwriting documenting the original boundaries. She knew. They all knew. But grandfather had become powerful by then. County board, bank board, church board. He made sure the new surveys became official. Cal's laugh was bitter. Called it manifest destiny. Said he was just being a good steward of land others couldn't manage. "And your father?" "Inherited an empire built on quicksand. He knew the truth, but he also employed half the valley. Provided loans, helped with medical bills, kept families afloat during bad years, made the theft look like benevolence." June thought of her own father, how he justified Daniel's abuse as protection and provision, how power could wear the mask of care. "And you?" "I believed the family myth, until Dad got sick." Cal's voice softened. "He called me to his study one night, showed me the original documents, said he'd tried to make it right through generosity, but it wasn't enough. Made me promise to find a way to balance the scales. The baby kicked, making June shift position. Cal immediately moved to help her stand, his hand lingering on her elbow. "That's why James had you attacked," she said. "You weren't just threatening his plan, you were threatening the whole foundation. The land's worth millions now. James has leveraged everything on acquiring the remaining independent parcels. One signature from me and he gets it all." Cal carefully rolled the map, treating it like the evidence it was. "Without that signature, the whole house of cards falls." June's eyes gleamed in the flashlight's beam. "No wonder he's desperate." Floorboard creaked below, making them both freeze. After a moment, Cal relaxed. "Just the house settling, but we can't stay here much longer. James will figure out this connection eventually." "Margaret Wheeler's property records," June mused. "The ones in the nursing home could prove the original boundaries. But James probably has people watching the facility." June smiled, her hand resting on her belly. "Nobody looks twice at a pregnant woman visiting the elderly, especially one with a legitimate rental agreement." "June," Cal's voice held warning and admiration in equal measure. "It's dangerous. Less dangerous than doing nothing." She took the map from him, adding it to their growing collection of evidence. "We have 4 weeks until the court date, until the baby. Time to show your brother that manifest destiny works both ways." Cal studied her in the dim light, seeing past the practical maternity dress and sensible shoes to the steel beneath. "What did I do to deserve you?" he asked softly. "You got chained to a tree," she replied, but her eyes held the same wonder as his. "Come on. I think there's more to find up here." They descended carefully, the map tucked safely away. Outside, the wind had picked up, rattling the old windows like angry ghosts. But in the warmth of their shared purpose, even ghosts held no terror. They had promises to keep, to Cal's father, to June's unborn child, to themselves. And somewhere in this house of secrets, they would find the truth that would set things right. The sheriff's business card appeared on the farmhouse porch like a harbinger, clean white against weathered wood, held down by a smooth river stone. June found it during her morning check of the property, her heart stuttering when she read the handwritten note on the back. "Need to talk. Both of you. Soon. Sheriff Marcus Wade." She brought it to Cal, who was sorting through Margaret Wheeler's old files in the kitchen. His face tightened when he read it. "Marcus was Dad's hunting buddy," he said. "Known him since I was a kid. Friend or enemy? That's what worries me." Cal turned the card over, studying the precise handwriting. "Marcus plays everything straight down the middle. If he's reaching out like this, someone's forcing his hand," June finished. She eased herself into a kitchen chair, the baby particularly active this morning. "Your brother or your ex?" Cal's hand found its way to her shoulder, a gesture that had become as natural as breathing. "Daniel's been asking questions in town, not even trying to be subtle anymore." June felt the familiar cold spread through her chest. "How much time do we have?" "Not much." Cal pulled out his phone, a prepaid burner they'd bought for emergencies. "Let me call Mike Reynolds first, see what he's heard." While Cal stepped onto the porch to make the call, June studied the sheriff's card. Marcus Wade's name was embossed in simple black letters, his office hours and contact information listed below. Professional, reliable, the kind of man who'd want to keep the peace, even if it meant disturbing it first. Cal returned looking grimmer than before. "James filed an official missing persons report," he said. "Added a concern about my mental state, given my erratic behavior since Dad's death. Marcus has to investigate now. Can't you just show yourself, prove you're fine, and leave you alone with Daniel circling?" Cal shook his head. "Besides, the moment I surface, James will have me detained for psychiatric evaluation. He's got 2 doctors ready to testify about my breakdown." A vehicle sound reached them. June was already moving toward the window, her body remembering months of vigilance. A police cruiser was making its way up the long drive, taking its time, giving them warning. "Back door," Cal said quietly. "Through the barn. Mike's place isn't." "Far, no." June's voice was firm. "Running makes us look guilty, makes you look unstable." She straightened, one hand resting on her belly. Let me handle this. June, I'm just Margaret Wheeler's tenant, remember? Seeking the quiet life before my baby comes? She managed to smile. Besides, who's going to doubt a motherly type who takes in an injured stranger? Cal studied her face, seeing the strength behind her gentle appearance. You're remarkable, he said softly. I'm practical. But she flushed under his gaze. Go upstairs. Be ready, but let me talk to him first. The cruiser was halfway up the drive now. Cal hesitated, then quickly pressed his lips to her forehead. Be careful, he murmured, before disappearing up the stairs. June took a deep breath, settling into the role of innocent bystander. By the time Sheriff Wade's boots hit the porch steps, she was calmly washing breakfast dishes. The knock was steady, unhurried. June dried her hands and opened the door to find a man in his 60s, with kind eyes and wolf's teeth behind them. His badge caught the morning light like a warning. Mrs. Wheeler's tenant, I assume? His voice was gentle, but his eyes missed nothing. Mind if we have a chat? Of course. June stepped back, portraying the perfect blend of confusion and courtesy. Would you like some coffee, Sheriff? The baby has me up early these days. Something flickered in Marcus's eyes. Sympathy, calculation, or both. He followed her to the kitchen, taking in the room's details with practiced ease. His gaze lingered on the 2 coffee cups in the dish drain, the men's work boots by the back door. Quiet place, he said, accepting the fresh cup she poured him. Good spot to disappear for a while. June met his eyes steadily. Sometimes quiet is exactly what's needed. Indeed. Marcus set his cup down, laying his business card on the table beside it. But sometimes quiet places attract troubled souls, people running from things, or to them. The baby kicked, hard enough to make June shift position. Marcus noticed, his expression softening slightly. Interesting times to be taking in strays, he said quietly. In that moment, June knew. Marcus Wade wasn't here as James Bennett's ally or Daniel's tool. He was here as someone who remembered what the Bennett name had once meant, who had hunted and laughed with a better man than James could ever be. He was here to warn them. After Sheriff Wade left, having said both everything and nothing, June found herself drawn to the small box she kept beneath her bed. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay her last ultrasound picture. She hadn't looked at it since fleeing the hospital in Idaho, terrified that Daniel might trace her through medical records. Cal found her sitting on the bed, staring at the grainy image. Without a word, he settled beside her, the mattress dipping under his weight. A girl, June said softly, tracing the curve of the baby's spine with one finger. I found out that day. Daniel had always wanted a son, said daughters were too soft, too weak. She smiled faintly. When the technician told me, I felt like I'd been given a secret weapon. Cal's hand covered hers where it rested on the image. Tell me about that day, he said quietly. The day you left. June closed her eyes, letting the memory surface. Daniel was supposed to be at work, but he came home early. Found me looking at private bank accounts, researching women's shelters. He didn't take it well. Cal's fingers tightened on hers, but he remained silent, letting her speak. I managed to get to my car, drove straight to the hospital. The nurse there, she took one look at me and knew, got me the ultrasound, gave me cash from her own wallet, helped me disappear. June opened her eyes, meeting Cal's steady gaze. Sometimes strangers save you, like you saved me, he said softly. Maybe we saved each other. She tucked the ultrasound picture back into its box. Your turn. Tell me something true. Something you've never told anyone. Cal was quiet for a long moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. Dad knew he was dying for months before he told us. He called me to his study one night, just me, showed me proof of everything James had been doing, everything our family had done. Said he'd tried to make it right through charity, but that just made him another kind of thief. He wanted redemption. He wanted his sons to be better men than he was. Cal's voice roughened. James was already gone by then, chasing empire. But Dad looked at me and said, some debts you can't repay with money, son. Some you repay with courage. June shifted closer, drawn by the raw honesty in his voice. That's when you started investigating? Started looking into everything? Found evidence of James's plans, the forged documents, the bribes. His laugh was hollow. Should have been more careful. But maybe part of me wanted to be caught, wanted it all in the open finally. The baby kicked, making them both start. Cal's hand moved instinctively to her belly, and this time June didn't pull away. They sat like that, connected by touch and truth, while evening light painted patterns on the worn floorboards. I'm scared, June admitted, surprising herself. Not of Daniel or James, but of... She gestured to her stomach. Of doing this alone. You're not alone. Cal's voice was fierce. Whatever happens with James, with the land, you're not alone anymore. June turned to face him fully. In the soft light, his bruises had faded to watercolor shadows, but his eyes held the same steady strength she'd seen that first morning in the woods. Neither are you, she said. Something shifted between them, delicate as a compass finding true north. Cal's free hand came up to cup her cheek, giving her every chance to pull away. Instead, June leaned into his touch, letting herself trust in something beyond survival. When he kissed her, it felt like coming home. The moment was broken by the sound of a car on the distant road. They pulled apart slowly, reality seeping back in. But something had changed, settled into place like the last piece of a puzzle neither of them knew they were solving. June carefully returned the ultrasound box to its hiding place. When she straightened, Cal was watching her with a mix of tenderness and determination that made her heart stutter. We should go through the rest of Margaret's papers, she said, finding her practical voice again. The sheriff's warning means we're running out of time. Cal nodded but caught her hand as she moved toward the door. June, he waited until she met his eyes. When this is over, the court date, the baby, all of it, I want you to know. I know, she said softly, and she did. Some truths didn't need words. They descended to the kitchen together, hands linked, ready to face whatever storms gathered on the horizon. Behind them, morning sun caught the ultrasound picture through its tissue wrapping, turning it to gold. The threat arrived. With the dawn, slipped under the kitchen door sometime in the night. The paper was expensive, the type James used for Bennett Holdings correspondence, but the message was pure back-alley menace. Last chance, little brother. Sign the papers in 24 hours, or we remind you what family loyalty means. Not everyone is as gentle with pregnant women as I am. Cal found June in the kitchen, the note trembling in her hands. Without a word, he wrapped his arms around her from behind, one hand protective over her belly. The baby stirred beneath his palm, a reminder of everything at stake. Mike Reynolds called, June said quietly. Someone broke into his house last night, took all the documents he'd gathered about the property lines. James is cleaning house. Cal's voice was tight with controlled anger, making sure there's nothing left to find. June turned in his embrace, showing him another paper she held, a printout of a social media post. Someone had shared a photo of her at the grocery store yesterday, asking if anyone recognized the pretty, pregnant lady new to town. Several comments mentioned her resemblance to a missing person from Idaho. Daniel will see this, she said, if he hasn't already. Cal studied both papers, his jaw clenching. Marcus Wade warned us this was coming, said we had maybe 2 days before James made his move. And Daniel's already here. June moved to the window, scanning the misty morning landscape. I saw his truck at the diner yesterday. He's not even trying to hide anymore. We need to go. Now. Cal started gathering their evidence. The old map, the property records, June's journal. Mike's cabin. No, June's voice was firm. You saw Marcus's reports. James has people watching every Bennett family connection. Running now would only prove his claims about your mental state. Better that than risking... What? Me? June turned, her eyes flashing. I didn't survive Daniel. Help you stand up to a sheriff just to run again. This is our home now, our stand. The word our hung between them, weighted with everything. that had changed since that morning in the woods. Cal touched her cheek gently, thumb tracing the stubborn set of her jaw. "James won't stop," he said softly. "And Daniel is a coward who gets brave behind closed doors." June covered his hand with hers. "But out here in the open, with witnesses and evidence, that's where men like him get weak." A noise outside made them both tense. Through the window, they caught a glimpse of movement at the tree line. A figure ducking behind a trunk. Then another. James's men watching the house. "They're getting bolder," Cal said, "testing our defenses." June picked up James's threat note again, studying the precise handwriting. Something caught her eye. "Cal, look at this. The letterhead. It's different from his usual papers." Cal examined it closely. "This is the old style, from when Dad was in charge. James changed it right after the funeral." His eyes widened. "He's using the old office, the one in town, where Dad kept all his records. The one place James wouldn't think to look," June said, understanding dawning. "Because he's so sure he's already won." Cal nodded slowly. "Dad's private files would still be there, including the original property surveys, the real ones. We need those files." June's hand rested on her belly, feeling their daughter's restless movements. "But they'll be expecting you." "Not you, though." Cal's voice held equal parts fear and admiration. "No one would suspect a pregnant woman of breaking into the old Bennett office, especially not with the sheriff's wife giving me a tour of the Historical Society Museum next door." June smiled grimly. Marcus's parting gift. An alibi. "June." Cal pulled her close, breathing in the lavender scent of her hair. "If anything happened to you, nothing will." She pressed his hand to her belly, letting him feel their daughter's strong kicks. "She's a fighter, like her mother, like the man who's going to help raise her." Cal's breath caught at the implicit promise in her words. Outside, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, and somewhere in town, two different kinds of monsters were drawing closer. But here, in this kitchen, with its creaking floors and morning light, something stronger than fear was taking root. "Tomorrow, then," Cal said finally, "while James is at the county meeting showing everyone what a concerned brother he is." "Tomorrow," June agreed. She picked up the threat note, tearing it precisely in half. Time to remind them both that some women aren't as soft as they think. The wind picked up outside, rattling the windows like a warning. Or perhaps, June thought, like applause for the storm about to break. The old Bennett office smelled of leather and secrets. June moved quietly through the darkened rooms, her flashlight beam carefully angled away from the windows. The Historical Society tour had provided the perfect cover. She'd excused herself to use the restroom, then slipped through the connecting door that Marcus's wife had conveniently left unlocked. Her hands trembled slightly as she worked the combination lock on Calvin Sr.'s old filing cabinet. Cal had memorized it years ago, watching his father from the office doorway, right to his mother's birthday, left to the year the ranch was founded, right again to the number of acres in the original property. The lock clicked open just as a car passed outside. June froze, one hand instinctively protecting her belly, but the vehicle moved on. Inside the cabinet, decades of Bennett history lay filed in manila folders, each labeled in careful handwriting. She found what she was looking for in a folder marked Original Surveys, Personal. Inside were property deeds older than the ones they'd discovered in Margaret's attic. But these were different. These bore notations in Calvin Sr.'s own hand, documenting each adjusted boundary, each moved marker, each forged document. "My insurance," read a note paperclip to the front. "In case my sons ever forget what honor means." June's phone vibrated. Cal's warning signal. James's meeting was ending early. She quickly photographed each page, her hands steady now with purpose. But as she went to close the folder, another document caught her eye. This one was newer, dated just weeks before Cal's father died. It was a revised will, properly notarized, but never filed. In it, Calvin Bennett II had left controlling interest in Bennett Holdings, not to James, but to Cal, with specific instructions about restoring the original property lines and making restitution to affected families. June's heart pounded. This was why James had moved so quickly after his father's death, why he'd needed Cal's signature on the new property deals. Without it, he had no legal right to... A floorboard creaked behind her. "Well," said a familiar voice that turned her blood. "To ice. Isn't this cozy?" Daniel stepped into the beam of her fallen flashlight. He looked exactly as she remembered, handsome in a cruel way, like a statue with sharp edges. Behind him stood James Bennett, his resemblance to Cal twisted by something. Hard in his eyes. "I told you she was clever," Daniel said conversationally, "always sneaking around, looking through things that don't belong to her." He moved closer, and June backed against the filing cabinet. "Just like she sneaked away with my child." "Our agreement was simple," James said, his voice corporate smooth. "You help me find my brother. I help you with your domestic situation." He gestured to June's belly. Fascinating how these things work out. June's mind raced. Cal would be checking the back entrance in exactly 3 minutes. If she could keep them talking. "The will," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "You knew about it. That's why you had to move so fast." Something flickered in James's expression. "Family businesses require decisive management. Like chaining your brother to a tree, having him declared mentally unfit?" "Cal was always too soft," James sneered. "Just like Dad became at the end. All that nonsense about restitution, about making things right. The only right in business is profit. And the only right in marriage," Daniel added, taking another step forward, "is a husband's authority over his wife and child." June's hand closed around the heavy flashlight. "You're both the same," she said quietly. "Men who mistake cruelty for strength. Who think ownership means—" The baby kicked then, hard enough to make June gasp. Daniel's eyes fixed on her belly with hungry possession. He reached for her, and June swung the flashlight with all her strength, catching him square in the temple. He dropped like a stone. James lunged forward, but June had already slammed the filing cabinet drawer into his midsection. She snatched the folder and ran, her practical shoes silent on the old floorboards. Cal met her at the back door, taking in her wild eyes, and the folder clutched to her chest. Behind them, shouting erupted from the office. "June, drive!" she gasped, climbing into his truck. "I've got what we need, all of it." They peeled away just as Daniel staggered to the office door, blood streaming from his temple. In the rear view mirror, June saw James pulling out his phone, probably calling the sheriff, but she smiled, feeling the folder secure against her chest, her daughter doing victory dances in her belly. Let them call Marcus. The truth was finally coming to light, and not even the combined forces of Daniel's rage and James's money could stop it now. "You're bleeding," Cal said, noticing a cut on her arm. "Just a scratch." June caught his worried glance. "But Cal, I think your father would have been proud of us today." His hand found hers as they sped toward the farmhouse, where Sheriff Wade and Mike Reynolds would be waiting. Behind them, storm clouds finally broke, washing the streets. Clean. The first contraction hit as they pulled into the farmhouse driveway. June clutched the stolen folder tighter, trying to breathe through the sudden pain. The hospital bracelet from her last checkup, still around her wrist, caught the afternoon light. Avery, June. High-risk pregnancy. 36 weeks. "No," she whispered. "Not now." Cal was already out of the truck, hurrying to her side. "June?" "Just stress," she managed, but another contraction gripped her. "The baby, she's too early." Sheriff Wade's cruiser appeared at the end of the drive, lights flashing. Behind it came Mike Reynolds' truck, then 2 more vehicles June didn't recognize, but Cal's attention was fixed entirely on her. "Hospital," he said firmly, reaching for... No," June clutched the folder. "James will have people there. We need to get these documents to Marcus first. Need to..." She broke off, gasping. "To hell with the documents." Cal's voice was fierce. "You and the baby matter more." Marcus Wade approached quickly, taking in the situation. "James just called." "It in," he said. "Claims Cal assaulted him at the office, kidnapped his unstable brother's pregnant wife." His eyes fell to June's hospital bracelet. "But that's not our biggest problem right now, is it?" June shook her head, tears threatening. Everything was falling apart. They were so close to exposing the truth, to ending both James's and Daniel's threats forever. She couldn't fail now. The will, she managed between breaths. Calvin's real will. "It's all here. James never had the right." "Give me the folder," Marcus said gently. "Mike and I will handle it. You need medical care." Another contraction, stronger this time. Cal's arms steadied her as her knees buckled. Through the haze of pain, she saw more vehicles approaching, James's corporate security, no doubt, coming to contain the situation. "They're coming," she gasped. "Cal, I need to get you to the hospital." His voice brooked no argument. "Marcus," the sheriff nodded. "Take the back roads. I'll deal with James." He produced a set of papers from his jacket. "Already got a judge's order backing us up. Found some interesting things in the county records." This morning, June tried to focus as Cal helped her into Marcus's personal vehicle, less conspicuous than his cruiser. Her hospital bracelet caught on his sleeve, and the sight of it triggered another memory. Her last doctor's warning about stress and early labor. Mike Reynolds appeared at the window. "Go," he said. "We've got enough here to keep James busy. And that ex of yours just got picked up for assault at the Bennett office. He'll be cooling his heels in county lockup." Relief warred with pain as Cal pulled away, taking the old logging road toward the hospital. June clung to his hand between contractions, watching their defenders grow smaller in the mirror. Marcus directing his deputies, Mike gathering witnesses, the farmhouse standing quiet witness to the coming storm. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "The timing is perfect." Cal's voice was warm with conviction. "You got us everything we need. Now let me take care of you, both of you." She looked down at her hospital bracelet, its warning about her high-risk status, suddenly seeming less like a threat and more like a promise. That she was known, that she would be protected, that this time she wouldn't face the pain alone. Through the windshield, she could see James's vehicles arriving at the farmhouse, could imagine his rage at finding Marcus waiting with legal documents instead of a vulnerable woman to threaten. Daniel was safely contained. James was about to learn what real justice felt like, and she was finally choosing to let someone else be strong. Another contraction took her, but Cal's steady presence made it bearable. The hospital bracelet, pressed against her skin like a reminder, she wasn't running anymore, wasn't hiding. She was heading toward something instead of away from it. "Cal?" She squeezed his hand as the pain eased. "When you said about taking care of us, I meant it." His eyes met hers briefly, full of certainty. "All of it, if you'll have me." Behind them, storm clouds gathered over the valley. But ahead, breaking through the darkness, a single shaft of sunlight illuminated the hospital on the hill. June touched her bracelet, feeling their daughter move beneath her heart. "We'll have you," she said softly, and for the first time since. She'd fled Daniel in the night. The future felt not just safe, but bright with promise. Cal's hand tightened on hers as they drove toward that promise, leaving the gathering storm behind. The police report lay open on June's hospital bed, its official language transforming their morning's chaos into cold facts. Suspect Daniel Reeves apprehended at Bennett Holdings' office, charged with breaking and entering, assault, violation of restraining order. She touched the pages gently, as if ensuring they were real. "Keep reading," Cal encouraged softly from his chair beside her bed. He'd barely left her side since they'd arrived, even when the nurses had tried to shoo him away during her examination. Second, suspect James Bennett, arrested attempting to destroy evidence of property fraud. June's voice caught as another contraction built. The medications had slowed her labor but couldn't stop it entirely. The monitors beeped steadily, tracking both her progress and their daughter's strong heartbeat. Cal's hand found hers as the pain peaked. When it eased, he continued reading where she'd left off. Documents recovered from Calvin Bennett II's private office provide evidence of systematic land fraud dating back to 1953, with recent attempts by James Bennett to continue and expand. These practices, your father would be proud, June said, watching Cal's face as he read. You finished what he started. We did. He set the report aside, touching her cheek gently. Though your method of breaking into the office wasn't exactly what I had in mind. Desperate times. June smiled, then sobered. Have you heard from Marcus? Just texted. James is trying to claim the documents are forgeries, but Mike Reynolds and 3 other witnesses have already signed statements about the original property boundaries. Cal's voice held quiet satisfaction. It's over. Really over. As if in response, the baby kicked sharply. The movement was visible even through June's hospital gown, making them both laugh. But their joy was interrupted by a commotion in the hallway. I demand to see her. James's voice carried through the door. That's my brother in there, clearly manipulating a vulnerable woman. June started to rise, but Cal was already moving. He opened the door to find James facing off with 2 deputies, his corporate polish cracking under desperation. Hello, brother, Cal said calmly. Looking for these. He held up the police report. Full confession from your associates about moving the property markers. Seems they're not as loyal when faced with criminal charges. James's face contorted. You have no idea what you've done. The loans, the investments, everything tied to those properties will be sorted out legally, came Marcus Wade's steady voice as he approached down the hall, along with restitution to the families affected. He nodded to June through the doorway. How you holding up? Better now. She managed a smile, especially knowing Daniel's in custody. Oh, he's not going anywhere, Marcus assured her. Between violating the restraining order and attacking you at the office. Let's just say he'll have plenty of time to think about his choices. James made one last attempt. Cal, be reasonable. We can still fix this. The family name will mean something honest again. Cal finished. He turned his back on his brother, returning to June's side as Marcus and his deputies led James away. The police report lay between them on the bed, its pages documenting the end of decades of deception. June touched the section detailing Daniel's arrest, feeling the last weight lift from her shoulders. I never thought, she said softly, that it would end like this, with truth winning out. Truth, Cal said, and courage. He picked up the report, folding it carefully. And love. The word hung in the air between them, simple and profound. June felt tears threatening, from relief, from hormones, from the overwhelming rightness of this moment. Another contraction gripped her, stronger than before. The monitor's beeping increased as their daughter's heartbeat accelerated in response. The nurse hurried in, checking readings. No more holding her back, she announced. This little one's ready to meet her family. Family. The word echoed in June's heart as Cal took her hand, his eyes full of something that looked remarkably like forever. I'm staying, he said, not to the nurse but to June. Not just for the birth, she understood, but for everything after. Good, June managed between breaths. Because I'm done running. The police report sat on the bedside table. Proof that sometimes justice prevails, that sometimes love wins over power, that sometimes home isn't a place, but a truth you fight to protect. Outside the window, the storm that had been gathering all day finally broke. But inside, surrounded by beeping monitors and medical efficiency and Cal's unwavering presence, June felt only peace. Their daughter was coming into a world where her father's rage couldn't reach her, where corrupt men faced consequences, where love meant protection instead of possession. She squeezed Cal's hand as the next contraction built. Ready? His answer was for more than just this moment. With you? Always. The birth certificate lay pristine on the hospital table, waiting to be filled out. June stared at its blank spaces through eyes heavy with exhaustion and wonder, particularly the line marked father's name. After 14 hours of labor, their daughter had arrived just as dawn broke over the mountains, her fierce cry echoing all the strength and determination that had brought them to this moment. "Sarah Margaret," she said softly, testing the name they'd chosen. Sarah for Cal's mother, Margaret for the woman whose home had given them sanctuary. Their daughter slept peacefully in Cal's arms, her tiny hand wrapped around his finger with surprising strength. "It suits her," Cal said, his voice rough with emotion. He hadn't left June's side through the entire labor, bearing her grip during contractions, whispering encouragement, sharing strength just as they had through everything else. June touched the birth certificate's empty spaces. "Cal, are you sure about this? Legally, I mean." He knew what she was asking. By signing as the father, he would be claiming Sarah as his own in every way that mattered. A lifetime commitment made in the space of a few pen strokes. "I've never been more sure of anything." He shifted Sarah gently, moving to sit on the edge of June's bed. "When I was chained to that tree, I thought I'd lost everything worth having. Then you found me, and I found something worth far more than land or money." June's fingers traced their daughter's delicate features, Cal's dark hair, her own stubborn chin. Sarah's birth weight was marked on the certificate's draft. 6 pounds, 4 ounces of pure miracle. A knock at the door preceded Marcus Wade's entrance. The sheriff carried a small box and wore a smile that suggested good news. "Thought you'd want to know," he said quietly, mindful of the sleeping baby. "Judge Franklin signed the papers this morning. James's assets are frozen pending full investigation, and all property claims are suspended until the original boundaries can be verified." "And Daniel," June asked, her hand instinctively tightening on Cal's arm, "being transferred to state custody. Multiple felony charges, plus violations of the restraining order." Marcus's face softened as he looked at Sarah. "He won't be a problem for a very long time." He set the box down and opened it, revealing a stack of documents. "There's more. Calvin's original will has been verified. Cal, you're officially the controlling shareholder of Bennett Holdings." He paused. "Your father made sure the truth would come out, one way or another." Cal's eyes glistened as he looked down at Sarah. He'd have loved being her grandfather. Speaking of which, Marcus produced another document from his box. "Mike, Reynolds and I took the liberty of having these drawn up. Adoption papers, if you want them. No pressure, but given everything." June's breath caught. Cal met her eyes, and in them she saw the same certainty she felt. "Yes," she whispered, "please." As if sensing the magnitude of the moment, Sarah stirred and opened her eyes, deep blue, holding all the promise of dawn. June watched as Cal signed first the birth certificate, then the adoption papers, his handwriting strong and sure, Calvin James Bennett III. "Welcome to the world, Sarah Margaret Bennett," he said softly, touching their daughter's cheek. "Your grandfather would say you're the best kind of inheritance." Marcus quietly excused himself, leaving the new family to their privacy. Outside, the window, sunshine broke through yesterday's storm clouds, painting the mountains in shades of gold and promise. June looked at the completed birth certificate, at the names that represented not just parentage, but choice, love, redemption. "She'll never have to run," she said, "never have to hide who she is or where she belongs." "No," Cal agreed. "She'll know exactly who she is, the daughter of a woman strong enough to save a stranger, brave enough to stand her ground, wise enough to know that family is more than blood, and the daughter of a man," June added, "who chose right over easy, truth over power, and love over empire." She smiled through tears. "Think she can handle that legacy?" Sarah chose that moment to let out a demanding cry, her tiny fists waving with determination. They laughed, recognizing in her passion their own fighting spirits. As Cal handed their daughter to June for feeding, the birth certificate caught the morning light, the ink still drying on their newly formed family. Outside, they could hear the hospital stirring to life, a new day beginning in a world already changed. "You know," Cal said, watching June with their daughter, Dad used to say that the best inheritance he could leave was the chance to make things right. He touched Sarah's curled fingers. I think he'd say we did pretty well. June looked at their daughter, at the man who had chosen to be her father, at the birth certificate that made it all official. We did more than that, she said softly. We made it better. The property settlement covered the kitchen table like a map of redemption. June sat in her familiar chair, Sarah sleeping peacefully against her chest, while Cal reviewed the final documents with Mike Reynolds. Each page represented another piece of justice: land returned, boundaries restored, 3 generations of wrongs finally set right. Margaret Wheeler's family gets the farmhouse and original acreage back, Mike explained, pointing to a section of the agreement. But they're offering you a 99-year lease at $1 a year. Said something about keeping good stewards on the land. June touched the paper with her free hand, remembering the day she'd first seen the weathered house. She'd been looking for a hiding place then. Instead, she'd found a home. The rest of the disputed properties? Cal asked, his hand warm on June's shoulder. Being returned to the original families or their heirs, with compensation for lost income. Mike smiled. Your father's emergency account is being put to good use there. James's creative accounting actually helped, gave us a clear paper trail of exactly what was owed. Sarah stirred, making small, snuffling noises that June had already learned meant hunger approaching. The sound drew Mike's attention to the baby, his weathered face softening. You know, he said, I remember when your father first started talking. About making things right, Cal. Never thought I'd see it happen, but here we are. He gestured to the settlement. And all because a pregnant woman stopped to help a stranger. Speaking of strangers, Cal said, any word on Daniel's sentencing? 20 years minimum. Mike's voice held satisfaction. Turns out, attacking a pregnant woman in front of witnesses was just the start. Police found evidence of other crimes once they started digging. He won't be troubling your family again. Family. The word settled around them like a warm blanket. June looked up at Cal, seeing in his eyes the same gratitude she felt. 7 weeks ago, they'd both been alone, running from different kinds of monsters. Now, there's one more thing, Mike said, pulling out a final document. The judge approved the name change for the company. Bennett Holdings is officially becoming Bennett and Wheeler Agricultural Trust, focusing on sustainable farming, helping small ranchers stay independent. Cal signed the paper without hesitation. Dad would have loved that. Your brother's not too happy about it, Mike added with a grim smile. Been making noise from his cell about family legacy. This is our family legacy. Now, Cal said, looking at June and Sarah, building something honest, something worth inheriting. Sarah's snuffles turned to more insistent noises. June stood carefully, practicing the art of moving with a newborn. I'll feed her upstairs, she said. You finish up here. Cal caught her hand as she passed, pressing a kiss to her palm. Such gestures had become natural between them, small moments of connection that meant more than grand declarations. The nursery, formerly June's hiding place for her journal and evidence, had been transformed during their hospital stay. Mike and Marcus's wife had organized a crew of local women, painting the walls soft green, hanging curtains that matched the Montana sky. The rocking chair by the window, June had learned, was the same one Cal's mother had used. As she settled into it with Sarah, she could hear Cal and Mike's voices drifting up from below, discussing plans for the trust, for rebuilding relationships with local farmers, for making the Bennett name mean something good again. June looked down at her daughter, counting tiny fingers for the 100th time. Your daddy, she whispered, is the kind of man who bleeds for what's right. And your mama, she smiled. Well, she learned to stop running and start fighting. You come from strong stock, little one. The property settlement would be filed tomorrow, making official what they already knew in their hearts. This was home. Not just the house, but the land itself, the community that had helped them stand against injustice, the legacy they were building together. Sarah's eyes drifted closed as she nursed. one hand curled possessively around June's finger. From downstairs came the sound of Mike leaving, then Cal's steady tread on the stairs. He appeared in the doorway, leaning against the frame with a look of quiet wonder that hadn't faded since Sarah's birth. "Everything settled?" June asked softly. "Everything." "That matters." He crossed to them, dropping a kiss on Sarah's dark hair, then June's lips. "Welcome home, for real this time." June leaned into his touch, feeling the rightness of it all. Outside their window, spring was coming to the valley, painting new life across the land they'd fought to protect. Inside, in this room that had once hidden secrets and now held only joy, their own new life was just beginning. The family photograph sat in a silver frame on the mantel, taken 6 months after Sarah's birth. June studied it now in the soft evening light, herself in a simple blue dress, Sarah bright-eyed in her arms, Cal standing behind them with one hand on June's shoulder. Behind them spread the restored Wheeler farmhouse, its weathered boards freshly painted, Margaret's roses blooming along the porch. But it was their expressions that caught at her heart. The quiet joy, the certainty, the sense of belonging that seemed to radiate from the image, so different from the formal Bennett family portraits that had once hung in the corporate offices. "Penny for your thoughts?" Cal's voice came from the doorway. He held Sarah, who was fighting sleep with her usual determination, just thinking about changes. June touched the frame gently. "The farmhouse, the trust, us, good changes?" He settled beside her on the couch, Sarah immediately reaching for her mother with drowsy demands. "The best." June took their daughter, breathing in her sweet baby scent. Mike called earlier. The last of the original families signed their restoration agreements today. It's really finished. Cal's arms slipped around her shoulders, warm and secure. "Not finished, just beginning properly." He nodded toward the window, where summer twilight painted the valley in shades of gold. "The Wheeler sons are coming back to restart their grandfather's dairy operation. Martinez's granddaughter wants to revive the old orchard, and the Bennett and Wheeler Agricultural Trust will help them do it." June smiled, remembering how different things had looked a year ago. "Your father would be proud of all of us," Cal said softly. He reached past her to pick up something that had been propped behind the photograph, an envelope, thick with official papers. Speaking of which, June recognized the law firm's letterhead. "The adoption? Final as of this morning." His voice held quiet triumph. "Sarah Margaret Bennett is officially, legally, irrevocably ours. Both of ours." Tears pricked June's eyes as she looked down at their sleeping daughter. Sarah's dark hair curled like Cal's, but she had June's determined chin, a perfect blend of chosen family and fated love. "I used to dream about this," she admitted. "When I was running from Daniel, staying in shelters, hiding in cheap motels, not just being safe, but being home, having a real family. And now I know those dreams weren't big enough." She leaned into his embrace. "Reality is better." Cal's hand covered hers where it rested on Sarah's back. "I was thinking, maybe reality could get even better." Something in his tone made June's heart skip. She turned to find him holding a small velvet box in his free hand. "I'm not asking because of Sarah," he said quickly, "or the trust, or any practical reason. I'm asking because that morning you found me in the woods, you didn't just save my life. You showed me what real courage looks like, what real love looks like." June's vision blurred as he opened the box, revealing a ring that wasn't flashy or ostentatious, but elegant and strong, like the love they'd built together. "You don't have to answer now," Cal continued. "I know with everything that happened with Daniel." "Yes," June cut him off softly. "My answer is yes." His smile could have lit the valley. As he slipped the ring onto her finger, Sarah stirred. Between them, blinking up with perfect timing. "See that, little one?" Cal's voice was rough with emotion. "Mama's making an honest man of me." June laughed through her tears. "Pretty sure you did that yourself, the day you chose right over easy." They sat together in the growing dusk, their daughter drifting back to sleep between them, the family photograph watching over them like a benediction. Outside, crickets began their evening chorus, and somewhere in the distance, coyotes sang. And to the rising moon, "We should take a new photo," June said eventually. "Once it's official, add it next to this one. Start our own wall of family portraits." Cal's voice held gentle amusement. "Less formal than the old Bennett ones? More truthful," June corrected. "Show Sarah what real legacy looks like." Cal touched the frame, then the ring on June's finger, then Sarah's sleeping face, connecting past, present, and future with love's simple geometry. "Speaking of legacy," he said, "Mike mentioned Margaret Wheeler's doing better. New treatments are helping. She remembered the farmhouse yesterday." June smiled, thinking of the woman whose home had given her sanctuary. "We should take Sarah to meet her, show her what her kindness created. A safe harbor," Cal said softly. "A fresh start. A family. A home," June finished, and kissed him in the gathering darkness, their daughter peaceful between them, the family photograph bearing witness to love's quiet victory. The new sign caught the morning sun, its hand-carved letters rich with promise. Wheeler Bennett Family Farm, Eston, 1952, renewed 2025. June stood with Sarah on her hip, watching Cal hang it at the entrance to their drive, replacing the weathered marker that had first guided her to sanctuary a year ago. "What do you think, little one?" she asked their daughter, who reached toward the sign with curious fingers. At 10 months old, Sarah was all motion and determination, a perfect blend of her parents' strength. "She approves," Cal said, stepping back to admire his work. He slipped an arm around them both, his wedding ring catching the light. They'd married last week in the farmhouse garden, surrounded by the families whose land they'd helped restore. Margaret Wheeler beaming from her place of honor in the front row, the valley spread before them, transformed not just by spring, but by justice. The Martinez orchards were blooming again, the Wheeler Dairy was sending out its first cheese batches, and the Bennett and Wheeler Agricultural Trust was helping 3 more family farms restart operations. "Hard to believe," June said softly, "that I almost drove past that morning, almost didn't stop to help a stranger chained to a tree. Good thing you're braver than you are sensible," Cal teased, but his eyes were serious. "You taught me that sometimes the biggest acts of courage look like simple choices." Sarah squirmed to be let down, eager to explore as always. They watched her toddle through the grass, fearless and free, everything they'd fought for embodied. In one small, precious life, the sign swayed gently in the morning breeze, its message both tribute and promise. The original date honored the valley's history, while renewed spoke of second chances, of love's power to transform wounds into wisdom. "So," Cal said, pulling June close, "ready for the next adventure?" June touched her stomach, where the earliest flutter of their second child had just made itself known. She hadn't told him yet, was waiting for the perfect moment. But looking at their daughter playing in the shadow of the new sign, at the valley coming back to life, at the man who had chosen to be her partner in all things, she knew every moment was perfect when you were finally home. "With you," she said, echoing his words from the day Sarah was born. "Always."